Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, the podcast where mothers share their powerful stories of healing and empowerment. I am your host, Amanda Quick, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and advocate. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of mothers who have overcome adversity, found their fierce feminine power, and embraced transformative parenting. Whether you're a mother driven to fight for your children or someone with a story burning inside you, this podcast is for you. Together, we'll explore themes of resilience, self-trust, and healing from our traumatic experiences, all spotlighting the profound journeys of awakened mothers. Join us for a space of naked authenticity, deep inspiration, and genuine connection. Embrace the divine feminine and discover your own warrior mama within. Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change.
Welcome back to another episode of Awakened Motherhood. I'm your host, Amanda Quick, and today I am very excited to introduce Melissa Armstrong. From a very young age, Melissa experienced more trauma and abuse than any one person should have to endure, including surviving a school shooting at age 15 and witnessing the death of her brother at age 18. She experienced many physical and emotional ailments as a result of the trauma and stress on her system. Ultimately, she dedicated her life to helping people, and she became a nurse, but after years of being failed by the traditional medical system, both personally and professionally, Melissa shifted her career. Now, as a trauma-informed functional health consultant and owner of Holistic Health, she helps women overcome the physical and emotional symptoms of chronic stress and trauma using a root cause approach, somatic healing, lifestyle and diet optimization, mindset, spirituality, and detoxification. Wow, Melissa, welcome. I am so excited to dig in because these are all of my interests and the things that matter to me. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I mean, you even just in your reading your bio, there's so much in the beginnings of who you were and what you had to endure and go through. And, I totally agree. More trauma and abuse than anybody should have to go through. But it all brought you here to where you are today. So why don't we kind of go in? We don't have to go in any level of detail that you're comfortable with, but, you want to talk about what your childhood was like. What does that mean?
Yeah. So my childhood was very chaotic, very abusive. Like you read from the bio, it's more than what any person should have to go through. It's kind of like a movie. Like when I think back of it now, and it seems almost like so distant that it seems like it almost didn't even happen to me, but it did. My parents were both addicts when I was very young. They used a lot of drugs. And as a result, everything that goes with that, like, just pure chaos in the house. We had no money because they spent it all on drugs. We a lot of times didn't have food. There was periods of homelessness. Because of the drug use, my dad was both of my parents were like psychologically unwell, obviously from their childhoods, which led them to even use drugs in the first place because they were self-medicating. But because of all that, my dad was really like physically abusive toward my mom and my older brother. And that was just like a common occurrence. Like that was our lives. And I remember being really, really young and just like watching him beat up my mom. And that, persisted for the first several years of my life. They finally got divorced when I was 6 because my mom wanted to get clean and my dad didn't. She did get clean, but he left and never really came back in any significant, impactful way. He never was able to really get clean or get his life together. And then he ultimately died. But, I only saw him a handful of times throughout the rest of my life, the rest of his life, I should say. And as a result of everything that my mom had gone through, both in her childhood that led her to use drugs in the first place, and then, with my dad and all of that, she became she was very broken. She became very like isolated and isolated herself from us. She was emotionally unavailable. And when she was around us, she was just really verbally abusive because she couldn't cope with the stress of single parenting, and she was a single parent of 4 children. One of my sisters has special needs, has Down syndrome. So just a really, really stressful time for her, for us, for, very low income. And then, like my bio says, there were some pretty tragic things that happened as I got older. When I was 11, I was molested. When I was 15, I survived a school shooting. And then when I was 18, my brother, who was 5 years older than me, was killed in a tragic accident right in front of me, with me like standing right there next to him. It was super, I was already unwell, like before that, everything that I had been through in my childhood, and then the shooting, and then my brother's death just really, was kind of like the tipping point for me, where I just, well, even before that, I wouldn't even say that was the tipping point. I was so unwell in my teenage years. I was suicidal. I was in and out of psychiatric facilities. I was on multiple medications. I was doing like intense psychiatric therapy. I was severely depressed, severely anxious. I had horrible panic, PTSD. Yeah.
It seems like things were just stacking on top of you, right?
Yeah.
One thing after the other, and you couldn't see through it, because it was just the next thing would always happen. The next big event would bring another set of traumas.
Yep.
And it's almost like you've never had experience what it even felt like to be safe ever in your life. And so you didn't even know how to dig out of that.
100%. Yeah.
And I think that, unfortunately, it's not the specifics, but the feeling of never being safe in our bodies and never having experienced a model of positive relationships or healthy coping mechanisms or, healthy processing of emotions, and all of that is unfortunately very common. And, it does have this kind of stacking impact. It does have this, the things that happen in childhood, and we recreate them in some other way, or we experience these other outside things that keep hitting us, and it just feels like we can't get down. And I'm curious, if you said, it was almost past your tipping point at that point when your brother died, but was there like a tipping point that what was the wake up call for you? What was the shift?
When I started to get well,
Yeah,
I lived in that state of like hypervigilance and depression and anxiety and panic and insomnia, and started to develop. So I was 18 when my brother died. And so I lived there in that state, like hypervigilant, hyperreactive nervous system, just like so unwell. I started having physical symptoms. I had tons of like GI symptoms, skin issues, migraines, you name it. I had it. At one point in my early 20s. I was on like 7 different medications. And I really was there for many years. And then when I was 24, when my brother died, I, by the grace of God, decided to become a nurse, and somehow was able to go through nursing school while I was like really dealing a lot with my own like physical and mental health struggles. I actually think in hindsight that probably helped me, because it gave me something like positive to focus on versus like just wallowing in my own despair. But yeah, when I was 24, I was having panic attacks regularly, and my now husband, then boyfriend, suggested to me that I try meditation, because I was just my nervous system was always firing. Like I was always in fight or flight. I was always panicked. I really, really struggled to just cope with like day-to-day minor stressors. It would just throw me into a tailspin, and I had daily panic attacks. And at one point when I was having a panic attack or coming out of one, I think he said, like, you're just so like stressed about everything. And I feel like if you could just calm down, like you would just feel so much better. Like you need to find a way to be able to calm down. Like, have you ever thought about meditation? I don't know. I've heard maybe meditation helps with that. Maybe you should try that.
maybe.
And I did. And I don't know why, but I was able to actually like successfully meditate like a couple of times. Which is funny because now I don't really use meditation as like a first line of defense for my clients because it's actually quite difficult to meditate.
The mind does not stop.
Yeah.
If you try.
But I was knowing nothing about meditation or somatic work or anything at that point. I was able to do it. And I started meditating for like 20 minutes at a day, like every single day. And I suddenly felt that sense of safety that you mentioned that I had never felt before in my whole entire life. And I felt like all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I can actually like calm my mind down and I can actually think clearly and feel a sense of calm in my body that I didn't know even existed. And that just opened the floodgates for me.
Did you use like a visualization meditation? Did you listen to YouTubes or anything?
Yeah. So this was like 2010. So I, you might know Deepak Chopra.
Yeah.
So I happened to like Google like meditation and something about he does, I don't know if he does it anymore. I've been told he does, but I have not looked into it. But he used to do these 21-day free meditation challenges with Oprah Winfrey. And so I just happened to like Google that. And there was one like that was starting like that day or the next day or something.
Perfectly
Like, so I just,
like,
yes. So I just like started and I was like, I'm just going to do this for 21 days. Like, what have I got to lose? And yeah, so I did guided. He does guided, or those were guided meditations.
Okay.
That's what I did for 21 days. And then I fell in love.
That is fascinating. I do think meditation is it is a harder skill to master. Be guided visualizations can be easier though, if you can, because you're listening to somebody else's voice instead of trying to, clear your own span.
Yeah.
Like quiet meditation, that one is a harder skill to master.
Yeah.
Well, that's really fascinating. And so then once you started meditating, you realized you finally felt safe in your body for the first time since you were born, because you probably really weren't even safe in utero if you were, born to an addict. And, I have had clients in the past that had that story, and it's almost like they need to be like rebirthed in their bodies to remember what safety even feels like, because it's never existed here. And that brought that feeling to you.
Yeah.
And so what happened from there? I mean, that had to be a pretty transformational realization.
Yeah. That opened the floodgates for me. I remember, so I was just becoming a nurse. I was working in a really stressful nursing environment. I was working in an inpatient pediatric ICU, so like super, super stressful. Working on night shift, brand new nurse, just so still reeling from all of the trauma from my childhood and all of that. And then, constantly going to the doctor to try to get answers for like, I would wake up covered in like a rash. I used to get like stress rashes, like all over my body, like hives on my whole body, waking up that way. And I would look like it would be on my cheeks, it was everywhere. And I remember just constantly trying to find the answers, and they would just give me pills, here's a steroid. We don't know why you're having the rash again. Like, take this steroid, it'll fix it. And it would make it go away, but then it would come back. So I was on antidepressants, sleeping pills, like you name it. I was on so much. And when I started meditating, I felt this sense of safety. I suddenly was like, well, wait a second. Like, I actually feel calm and like, I feel great when I meditate. Like, how could this impact like my overall health and well-being? And then I started just like diving in head first, really. I learned about neuroplasticity. I learned about what even is meditation and why does it work? And what are other types of meditations and other types of somatic work? And what is health really? And what is trauma? And how does trauma affect your body? And read Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. And just, it was kind of like a cascade over a few years where I just like all of a sudden had this like, coming out of the chrysalis kind of like understanding like, wow, this is like a whole new world that I had never been taught about as a nurse. I had never considered as a patient or a professional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and then, and so then it sent you on this journey to basically heal yourself in a lot of ways. And I think that,
Yes.
those of us who've been on this journey, that is where we start.
Yeah.
We realize all the things we've been through and that we really want to come out of them and we want to help. And, those of us who are parents are also very focused on how do we help our kids. And, I know that, the things I walked through, it's the same. It's how do I get out of this situation? How do I heal myself? How do I help my kids? And then eventually we realize this stuff needs to be, we need to do more. We need to help other people too.
Yeah.
So, so as all that happens, and you said, you were obviously failed by the medical system. And then at some point you realized there was more than just meditation. There was somatic work. There was all of these other mindset things. There was, spirituality, the way that we actually can support our body, all of these pieces. And then you made a career change.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I was kind of going through, I think healing is a lifelong journey, but I think like I went through the bulk of it.
Mm.
And then suddenly, 6-8 years ago, I was like, wow, this model that I'm working in, like as a traditional hospital nurse, don't get me wrong, we need ICUs, we need ORs, we need ERs, but like I remember explicitly, 6 or so years ago having a conversation. At that point, I had gone out of hospital nursing and I was working just in like an outpatient primary care clinic. And I remember having a conversation with one of the physicians in our clinic about a new onset diabetic, a male. He came in, he was, I don't remember, in his 40s maybe. And he had just been diagnosed over the weekend. It was like a Monday or Tuesday, maybe. I think it was a Monday. He had just been diagnosed over the weekend and been seen in an ER for symptoms that were eventually diagnosed as type 2 diabetes. Sent home with insulin and didn't know how to administer it. Came in to me for an appointment for education about insulin administration. And in the conversation with him, I said to him, so did they give you at the ER, did they give you a dietitian consult? And he was like, why would they do that? And I was like, well, because you have diabetes. What do you mean? Why would they do? And he's like, does my diabetes have to do with a dietitian? And I just like my mind blew. And I was like, wait, like it has everything. Like your diabetes is because of what you're eating. Like it's your blood sugar. Like what do you?
Yeah.
And so like then it was like explaining that to him, and he's like, oh, I had no idea. And I suddenly felt myself getting like was so overcome with anger that like how could this man be discharged from the ER without knowing that his diabetes was directly related to his food.
Yeah.
And maybe he was told, like who knows? Like maybe he just didn't remember and he was in a diabetic haze.
The
And
American Diabetes Association does not actually address diet correctly.
Correct. At 100%. Yeah. And I had already kind of seen that in my own personal experience. And I just felt like, okay, well, they're just giving him insulin, but they're not actually addressing, he's like in his 40s, like he wasn't very much older than me, like, and so I had a conversation with one of the physicians about it, and he said, and I said, I need to be able to spend more time with this guy. Like I came out to go talk to my chief, and he's like, and I said, I need to spend more time with this guy. I need to explain to this guy. And he's like, oh no, we don't have time for that. Like you got another client, you have another patient. Like, and I remember just being like so mad. I was like, what are we actually doing here? And I feel like that was a really pivotal point for me. Because I realized, I mean, in that time and like leading up to that conversation, I realized that I was not aligned with that model. And that again, we need ICUs, ORs, all of that, but like the pill for every ill, like I just don't agree with it.
I know, and I like to call that almost this like sacred rage. It's not a bad thing. It's not bad anger. It's this like, we have to fucking do something about this. This is not okay. And I have definitely been there in various ways with the way when I look at the different systems that we have, and it's infuriating.
Mm-hmm.
And, we watched people who, would potentially make different choices if they knew there was different choices to make.
Right.
But the different choices don't support the system as it's been designed. And that's where the anger usually comes in. It's
the system is designed like the system is designed to make money. It's not it's a for-profit system, even if it's a non-profit hospital, like insurance agencies, hospitals, pharmaceutical industry, like they're all working together to make a profit. And their bottom line is really to the shareholders, not to the patient. And that's really where like I was just like, okay, I just don't agree with it. And I realized I wanted to do something on my own. I knew I could help people. I have years of nursing knowledge. I have years of knowledge. I understand how the body works, and I can help people in a different way. So that's what I did.
You left, and now you do something totally different. But so what does it look like today?
So my practice is Holistic Health by Melissa, and I just help women, primarily women. I do have some male clients, overcome the physical and emotional symptoms that come along with chronic stress and trauma. I feel like that is a huge missing piece from traditional medicine. We don't address diet, lifestyle, and stress like we should. This, research shows us over and over and over again that stress is either the cause or worsens 95% of the symptoms that we have. And so many people today are so overstimulated, overstressed, under rested. They're not eating right. They're not treating their bodies right. They have all these negative repetitive thoughts. Anxiety rates are through the roof. Depression rates, suicide rates, it's all through the roof. We're lonelier and sicker than ever. And so that's what I mean. Now
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
And it's I have, it's in my own children. They, have their challenges too. And there's, this realization that I have with them that the cause of so much is the inflammation that is stored through the traumas. And then because autoimmune and allergy responses and inflammation is cumulative, the more things we go through, the more that it gets stacked. And so even something that never used to trigger now triggers everything. Right. And so it's until we start to peel back those layers, you can't even start to heal. And I think that's, but no doctor is going to look at you that way. No doctor, even if you go in for allergy treatments, it's, well, here, let's just give you allergy shots. Like that doesn't actually, you're not dealing with the actual inflammation. You're in some cases worsening it.
Yep. And then you keep exposing yourself to the allergen because you're on these allergy shots now, and you just,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
bad.
And it's just all of these things, and it makes me frustrated as a parent, but at the same time, I have stopped a long time ago, stopped giving my, somebody else doesn't have that answer. It's, if you're not aligned with how I look at, the world and healing, you probably aren't going to be the one to have keys for me here.
Yeah.
And, and I realize that, and I always look for alternative approaches. I think it's still important in life or limb. I agree with you. ER surgeries, we need that, and sometimes we need to get stable first, and that's where they really help. But long-term support, I don't think that's the answer. And, we have to look at the deeper causes of what we experienced. We have to look at our trauma, not just our trauma, but our family line's trauma. And, we were parented by wounded people.
Yeah.
And, and then we called wounded people into our lives. And then we had all of these things that we, lived through, as well as, all of the beliefs that we have and the stories that are in our minds and everything like that. And, I'm sure in a lot of ways, it's been rewarding in a different way to actually see that you've not only been able to help support you, but you now have the ability to support other people. And it, in some ways, revalidates and re-deepens your desire to do so, because you can actually see this model works differently.
Yeah. My whole life is, I realize now through meditation, actually meditation for me kind of turned into a form of prayer. And that's actually how I found spirituality and found God. And now I read the Bible, I believe in Jesus, and I go to church. And I think that has been a huge part of my healing. But I know now from all of these experiences and now reading the Bible, like Romans 8:28 says that God works all things for the good of those who love him. So I know for a fact that I am exactly where I am supposed to be in this moment, because like everything that I went through before is all part of this. Like I needed to go through all of that because I am going to help people in a different way. I think that, like you were saying a moment ago, like really standardized medicine, which was really starting to like come to a head when I became a nurse in 2010, and like has been the death of like real good medicine, because personalized medicine is where it's at. Standardized medicine is not where it's at, because you and I don't necessarily need the same treatment for the same illness. Our bodies are different, and we've been sort of brainwashed, I think, to believe that like these super hyper subspecialty doctors are like the most prestigious like doctors that exist. And it's actually not true, because it's like when you go to a cardiologist that doesn't consider your mental state or your endocrine system or your, like the other meds that you're on for other things, like you go to your cardiologist for this, you go to your endocrinologist for your diabetes, you go to your pulmonologist for your asthma, you go to, like why are we not? We're one person. We are not 1,000 different systems operating next to each other. We are one organism of complex, interconnected systems.
Right. Everything is connected.
Yes.
Everything is connected. And that was a big awareness that I had. I took a different path. I didn't have any medical background, but I jumped into like learning about energy healing, and I started understanding the physical, mental, and emotional stacking that was happening. And so I went in from a different lens, but I was still able to see the physical impacts that we're having because of your emotions, because of the beliefs that you were holding and the triggers that you were having, and I experienced in myself having also panic attacks, and those are emotional triggers. They've been happening. And then I have a physical response. Like it's seemingly obvious. And yet people can't go then assume that the rash you get has anything to do with the, like, it's
Right.
just the next step. Right.
Right.
And, and I think it's really a sad thing in a lot of ways. It can definitely cause a lot of frustration, but at the same time, it's, open the space for you to have that journey. And I love what you said about this understanding of you had to go through these things. And it's not like you're holding, it feels to me like you've let a lot of the pain go in a sense. And there's a lot of the resentment or judgments or, and I think a lot of people who've had that childhood trauma, they sit in the shame and the blame for so long, and they're victims to it in a lot of ways, because how dare my parents act that way or all these things. But when they do that, they don't ever have the ability to actually see the value in those experiences. And they can't get to the point where I had to really be in it to learn what it was like in it so I could find my way out and then bring other people with me.
Right. Right. And if you're just stuck there, you're just like re-traumatizing yourself over and over and over again. A lot of times you're right in thinking that, like, how dare my parents act that way? Like, you're completely right. Like, they shouldn't have acted that way. And also, it can also be true that you can heal and move past that and forgive them. And forgiveness doesn't mean that you're justifying or allowing or saying that it was fine that they did that. It's just about, forgiveness is more about you and just being able to let go of it and move past it. Healing is a lifelong journey. I've said that from the very beginning. Like I have healed a ton from everything that I've been through, and I have let go of a lot of things, but there's still a lot of things that I'm working through. And it's complex,
Yeah. And I think that's true for everybody, right? It's like these new levels of understanding. And I know for me, sometimes I get into these new places and then things that I thought I had overcome come back up from a different perspective and a different lens. And I see how it showed up in other ways that I hadn't considered yet because I couldn't see it with all the other things in front of it first.
Yeah. And you almost have to deal with like one thing at a time. You have to deal with that before you can ever even get to the other layer of how it's impacting you.
Exactly. Whether it's relationship patterns that we repeat, whether it's, our nervous system, triggers, whether it's health things, there's so many versions of it. But, it's like I went through so many things with my, ex-husband. And then I feel like I understood how I was attracted to him. I understood the pattern that created. I understood what was happening in my body that I wasn't listening to because I had a lot of signs. But at the same time, I didn't go back far enough to see what had caused everything before that. And so it's like we got through one piece. And then I went into my teenage years and it's like, oh, okay, I see where some of this started. And then we start to kind of see it in a whole nother layer and lens. And, and even finding things in very early childhood that we almost have no memory of because we were so young, but our body remembers. And I think that is even more true for a lot of people where they don't have the actual like lived experience memory, but they know that something is triggered in their system when these things happen.
Yeah.
And it's caused a physical response. I was actually, I'm working with a woman who's doing some work on allergies and my kids' bodies right now. And she gave this interesting example that I actually think is really relevant here, where she was saying, if you're in a car accident and your dog is in the seat next to you and you've never had a reaction to your dog, but you're in this car accident, you have a trauma response and your dog is there. And then all of a sudden after the car accident, your dog now bothers your skin and you get allergic reactions. It's not about the dog, right? And it's not about addressing and putting allergy, reactions and making your system more inflamed. It's about addressing the trauma that he just happened to be a part of. And our bodies get kind of miswired in these situations. And I think that type of thing happens all the time where we have these triggers that aren't even directly connected.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. I heard I was listening to something not too long ago. I can't remember the woman's name. It was like some summit on trauma. And she was talking kind of about the same thing. Like when you have surgery, like there's a lot of people will like be put under anesthesia for surgery and come out with some sort of like, think of if you're having like abdominal surgery. That was the example that she used. Like when you're having abdominal surgery and then suddenly, like if somebody just like touches you there or even not touches you there, but like even just like nearby, like on your arm or something, like suddenly you like tense up and it's like you were not even like anything bad happened, but like you had surgery and you were out and like having people like manipulate your body and touch your body while you don't have any control of it. It's that loss of control where you can actually feel traumatized from a situation that's completely, not like something horrible was done to you, but like just an event that happened. And your body stores that trauma inside of you until you can process out of it. I love, I already plugged it a little bit ago, but Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score is a phenomenal book about this exact topic.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really perfect example. And that's really where the somatic work comes in, right? It's like finding where we have these things stored in our bodies and learning how to release it. And learning how to have different coping mechanisms and how to release that stress. Because it's not that, and this is the thing that I think is people don't always realize. It's not that we're just healing from past things. We have to learn how to respond to life moving forward too. And
there's always going to be things,
especially in the world right now, right? And and if you're parents and your kids especially, they're some of our biggest triggers. And the things that they say and things that they do have a reaction to us. The things that they go through, we have a response to. We have the world events like regular life stressors. And if we're already in a really heightened nervous system state, it's like we can't even get ahead of it. And I'm curious what you would say to somebody who's been in that fight or flight stage for such a long time and is trying to just survive. They're just trying to, get through the day and not be triggered all the time. Like where do you suggest people start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I start with all of my clients and anybody all the time with like basic reconnection of the mind and the body. So like super introductory, basic techniques where you can just start to reestablish that connection from the mind to the body and the body back to the mind. Because I think we have learned in our culture and through all of these trauma responses and, just this overstimulated 2024 environment that we live in where we're just inundated with stimulation all the time. We've learned to disconnect from our body. We don't even know. So much of us spend so much time like primarily in our head. We don't even know how we feel in our body and how the things that are happening to us, the day-to-day life stressors, the big traumatic events that happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago when you were a child, those sorts of things are actually still showing up in our body. So reestablishing that mind-body connection and really working to start to regulate the nervous system. One of the first easiest things that you can do is a body scan, which is just scanning your body, stopping for a second and allowing yourself a few minutes to just close your eyes, take a couple deep breaths, and scan your body. And just notice if you have any tightness or tension or discomfort anywhere. Just noticing it without judgment. That's a really big key. Don't judge it. Don't try to change it. Oh yeah, I do feel tight in my stomach. Gosh, I shouldn't feel that way. And like, I remember, I know a lot of people, a lot of women I work with, they'll know exactly like, yeah, I have that tightness in my stomach. And it's because like this conversation that I had 4 days ago with my husband is just like, and I know I shouldn't feel like that. And that's not helpful. You can't judge yourself because it's just re-traumatizing you. So just a body scan. Just a body scan.
Allow yourself to recognize that you actually can be connected, right? That's the point of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's, I love that example. It's something I used to do regularly. I don't do it as often anymore, but it was something I used to do, almost before I would go to sleep, like check in. What am I, where am I? Just, just energetically in my body.
Yeah.
How do I feel? And just noticing it. That's almost like a curiosity is okay, but not a judgment, right?
I don't do it very much anymore, like consciously, but I wonder if it's the same for you. Like, I feel like I just kind of do it all the time. Like I'm so connected, like my mind and body are so connected. I just know when that feeling comes up, I don't have to stop and think about it. Like, oh, how am I feeling today? It's like, if I have a sensation in my body, I'm like, oh, wow, what is that? Where did that come? Like, I just notice it because I've been doing it for so long. So
yeah, I think that's probably a big piece of it. It does become instinctual and you don't disconnect from your body in the same way.
Yeah.
And, it also built I think this is another big piece. It's actually rebuilding the relationship you have with yourself on all of these different levels.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're so disconnected from our bodies, from our emotions, from, spirituality or whatever the piece is that we almost have to like relearn who we are, relearn who our body is. And it's like, oh, and instead of being in judgment and, oh, I don't like this part or I don't, it's like, no, actually you've served me really well and I'm grateful and thank you, body. Or you're having a response there, but thank you for showing me that this is actually bothering me because I was just going to shove it down and ignore it.
Yeah. He's good at that.
Right? That's the thing we're good at. But,
yeah,
we're less good at acknowledging where our body's talking to us the whole time. And that, I know, was a big aha for me.
Yeah.
As I reflected and went through, I actually got to see all the places where I was actually connected. I just didn't listen. And that's hard. We've got to forgive ourselves. We've got to let that go. But when we see that, wait a minute, we actually did get, physical responses. We did get intuitive messages. We did have our instincts were actually intact. We just were never taught what to do with them or how to trust them. And, then there's kind of this reconnection and integrating with ourselves and rebuilding that relationship with all of the different layers of ourselves.
Yeah. So true.
It's a talk. I got a lot of amazing stories. I feel like you're definitely somebody who should write a book one day if you haven't already.
It's on my radar.
It's on your radar. Good, good. It was definitely a very healing thing for me to do, especially after doing a lot of other work, because I got to see all of the places it was still in my body. And it's, when you know what to do about that, it's actually really helpful in a lot of ways to dig that out. Because as you're writing it, you reseal it in a different way, and also help to show how much you've overcome and how much doesn't trigger you anymore. So, but I feel like there's so many different pieces here for people to really dig into and seal, and your story resonates, I'm sure, with so many, whether it's big or smaller things that have happened to them. And I definitely know that constant fight or flight state. I mean, I was diagnosed with PTSD myself at one point, because I was in a constant state of hypervigilance and having panic attacks. And it was all directly related to one situation. But, that was really the catalyst for me to get out of it, because I can't live like this. And so, sometimes it really takes us to get that bad for us to realize there's another way. And, I don't sit in judgment of that anymore. I wish sometimes the lessons didn't have to be quite that. Right. But at the same time, I think in a lot of ways, having gone through it, it also helps people know that you get it in a different way too, because they can feel that you understand. And it's not like, you're somebody telling them how they should be acting. You're, if anything, saying like, this is what, I went through. So I know how this feels. And this is, what your body is saying. And they, you almost can have a different kind of conversation with them because of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the opportunity to be able to help women, just kind of offer them some empathy and support in a way that I feel like a lot of us feel like we've never had that from someone. A lot of my clients now say to me like, nobody ever listens to me like this, and just like validating that and just being there. To support them and tell them, I tell people a lot, like tell my clients a lot, I'm not going to let you talk to you like that. You're not going to do that. If not with me here. No,
you get to be the safe space that they never had. Right. Mm-hmm. And you get to kind of show them that this is what it looks like, and that's what it feels like. And, you get to be an example in a sense, right? Meditation brought you to that place, but you get to in a lot of ways be that place for them to connect to. And I think that's not a lot of people can do that and hold space for the really big stuff. And it really does take somebody who's been there.
Yeah.
But it is, I know for me, and I am curious if you would agree, but I wouldn't trade the things I went through anymore, because I wouldn't have the understandings I do now.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. That's how I came to that realization when I said, like, I know that everything has had a, it's all for this purpose. Somebody had said to me earlier this year when I was recording a podcast, the host said, "Wow, I'm so sorry." And that's a pretty typical reaction to my story. I get that, like a lot of people don't know how to respond, and that's a normal response, I think. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you've been through so much. And all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I'm just really not sorry. I appreciate the sympathy. I appreciate the empathy. I really do. I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm not sorry, because I know that like I've healed from it. I'm good. It's good.
Yeah.
And
it's
now I just get to use
it in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
it's exactly. It's this gift that we didn't know we were getting, and it came in a very interesting looking package. But it is in fact a gift.
Yeah, and like you said, like, do I want to go relive it all? No, of course I don't. It wasn't that great, but like,
yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And this is exactly why, I'm wanting to share these stories, because I really want to help people see another possibility of how they can look at the really freaking hard things and see them for the gifts that they could be if we wanted to step into that, and see them for the stories that are really worth sharing and helping other people. And, I'm really honored that you are here and sharing your story with us. And your, story is very different than mine, but we both ended up in, a very hypervigilant nervous system state, and we both found our way out, although through different means. We come out on the other side and get reconnected. And now, are on different versions of this mission to help other people. And I think that's amazing. And if you have do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with people who may be listening? I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I just always want to remind people that it doesn't matter what your experience has been, what your life has been, what your past looks like, what the doctor told you. None of it matters. What matters is that healing is always possible. It's always possible. I promise you. You don't have to own that. You don't have to live there. The doctor can be wrong. Like it's healing. It's always possible.
Freaking men. I 100% agree. And I just thank you again so much for sharing your story and your wisdom. And if people want to connect with you, I don't know if you do virtual sessions or you just work in person, but if you want to share how they can get in touch if they want to explore themselves.
Yeah, I'm fully virtual. My website is holistichealthbymelissa.com. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Holistic Health by Melissa.
And I will put all those links in the show notes as well for our listeners. So thank you again.
There's lots of free stuff on my website too. Like go check out my website. There's free masterclasses, free nervous system guides, quizzes, like ton of free stuff. I do free stuff on my Facebook all the time.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you for everything that you're doing and all of the value you're putting out into the world and supporting people in this journey, because
absolutely
there's a lot of us. I'm so grateful. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
I will see you all on the next episode.
Thank you for joining us on Awakened Motherhood. I hope today's episode inspired you and offered support for your journey. Remember, your story has the power to ignite change, and your resilience is a testament to your strength as a mother. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Share it with other mothers who might benefit from our stories of empowerment and healing. I invite you to connect with me on social media platforms at Amanda Quick Healing, or visit my website, amandaquickhealing.com, for more information on other ways to work with me. Until next time, keep embracing your divine self and discovering your warrior mama within. Thank you for being part of Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change.